Hi, and welcome back to another Super Unreal Power tutorial. Today, we're going to pick up where we left off with our duplication power. As the last video started to get pretty long, I decided to split this into two videos. In case you haven't seen the first part, I left a link in part 1 of the description. That said, let's finish off this ability. Now back in our animation blueprint, we need to make an adjustment in our state machine. Off of the idle walk run, we're going to need a death state. It's super simple. We're just going to drag off of this, create a new state. We're just going to call this death. Let's drag off of our death state and connect back to our idle run. And then let's create the condition here. So let's promote off of can enter, got promote to variable, and we're going to say is dead. So what we're asking here is if the character is dead, then we will enter this transition. And now for the return transition, we're going to get our is dead, and then we want to get a not boolean. So if we are not dead, then we are going to return to our idle walk run animation pose. Alright, so the next thing that we need to do is we need to create an is dead variable in our clones. And then what we're going to do is connect the animation blueprint to those clones. If the dead state in the clone connects with the dead state here in our animation blueprint, then it's going to transition into our death state here. One other thing, we need to bring in our death animation here real quick. Not death, we need this. We'll plug this right into our result. And we also want to make sure that we're not looping because, well, we only want to do the death animation once. Because that's kind of how that works, usually. Alright, so we have that. And let's go into our clone and record what happens when our clone characters die. First, let's create that is dead bool here. Okay, and we're going to need one more variable, which is going to be our health. So, so once our health gets to 0, then our character will die. Right down here, let's right-click and put in the event any damage. Let's both set and get our health. We'll plug the executable in. Okay, so let's bring our health up here real quick. And then off of the damage, let's drag off and we're going to get a minus node. And then let's move the damage to the bottom, plug in the health on the top. Alright, now anytime damage is dealt, it's going to get our health and it's going to subtract the amount of damage, and then it's going to set our health to whatever that value was. And next, we need to get a branch node. Hold the B key and then click anywhere and you'll get and then a branch node will pop up. Off of the condition, we're going to get a greater than or equal to. Alright, now plug our health into that. Alright, now if our health is not greater than or less than or equal to 0, then off of the false, this is where you could put like a hit animation or something like that, or make him say ouch or something, whatever you want to do. We're just going to do a print string, and then we're just going to make it say ouch. But if the clone's health is less than or equal to 0, then we're going to set is dead to true and then move on with the rest of the function. First, we're going to alter the number of clones that we have. So we need to get our number of clones variable from the prime character. So what we're going to have to do is we are going to right click, we're going to get player character, we're going to cast to our prime character, plug that in. A more efficient way to do this would be to make this cast on spawn. So why don't we actually do that instead? And then we can promote this to a variable, so it's just going to use the variable to reference it every time instead of making this cast. Because casting gets kind of expensive, so if we can do it as few times as we can, then it's going to make the game just run faster, or run smoother, which is going to be quite useful since we're making a game about adding a whole bunch of actors. So let's drag off of this. We're going to promote this to the variable, and we're just going to say prime character ref. Now down here, we're going to get that reference. Now we're going to get number of clone. Let's get the current number of clones here, and we're going to get another minus node, and we're going to subtract that by 1. Now we're also going to have to set our current number of characters, or current number of clones too. So let's set current number of clones. Plug the executables in. We're going to plug our new value in here, and so we should be set there. Now every time one of our clones dies, it's going to -1 from our current number. Lastly, we need to remove the character after it dies. So we're going to get our character movement here. We're going to drag off and get a stop movement immediately node. Then we're going to put in a delay. And let's change that delay to, let's say, 3 seconds, so then the clone will stay alive or will stay on the map for 3 seconds before we make it disappear. So off of the completed, right-click in the event graph, destroy actor, plug that in. The target is already set to self, so we don't need to do anything else there. All right, now our clones can die, so let's compile and save. Okay, so we got one last thing to do here. For that, we're going to have to go back into our animation blueprint, and we need to go to the event graph and connect the isDead variables up. So let's drag off of try get pawn owner. We're going to cast to our clone. And then as our clone, we're going to get isDead, and we're going to set that to the current variable isDead here. And we'll plug the two of those in. Now we can test this out. Okay, so let's spawn a few of these clones. And then we're going to go up to 1 and punch them. And okay, looks like everything's working. We're hitting them, and then they're going to do their death animation, and after 3 seconds, they disappear. So far everything, and oh, wait, hold on. So now that we've dropped by 3, we should be able to clone 3 more, and we can. Can't clone, we've hit our limit. Let's get 1 more, and then we can spawn another. It looks like everything's working just as it should. Alright, now our clone can die, and then it'll let us clone another. So the next thing that we want to do is make these guys do something once we spawn them. And for that, we're going to have to go into some AI work, and I'm going to use the behavior tree for that, just to get the ball rolling. Once you've got a behavior tree set up, you can kind of make your clones do basically whatever you want. Attack your targets, pick up resources, or just walk around. And that's where we're going to finish off with this video. But once we've got that, you'll have basically everything that you need to put the multiplication power into your game. Okay, so let's go back to the level editor. We'll close out of these. And let's first add a new folder for the sound real quick. We'll just call it SFX, and we'll get those sounds out of the way here. And then let's create a new folder that we're just going to call AI. Now inside this folder, we're going to need a few new things here. First, we're going to need an AI controller. So what we're going to have to do is we'll go to Blueprint Class, click All Classes, and then let's type in AI and AI Controller here. And let's just call this AIC for AI Controller _ Clone Controller. There we go. And next we're going to need a behavior tree, so let's right click again. Under Artificial Intelligence, we're going to need a behavior tree. And let's just call this BT Clone. And last we're going to need a blackboard. And now what the blackboard does is it's going to hold a bunch of variables that our behavior tree is going to use to delegate instructions to our clones. So let's right click. Artificial Intelligence and Blackboard, and we're just going to call this BB _ clone. Now we're going to go into our AI controller. Let's go to our event graph, and we need to tell it to run the behavior tree that we want. So let's drag off of here. We're going to select run behavior tree, and for the asset we're going to select our clone behavior tree, and that's all we need here. So I'll save. Let's close out of the controller, back into our level editor, and now we need to tell our clone how to use this. So let's go into our clone BP, which should still be up here unless you closed it. Let's go into our clone, our class defaults, and under pawn we're going to change our AI controller class to our clone controller. And now this is really important. Here we have auto possess AI. If we don't change this to placed in world or spawned, whenever we spawn the asset from our ability, it's not going to give it this controller class. So now that we have that changed, let's compile and save. And then we're going to go back to our level editor and open up our behavior tree here. Now the first thing we need to do We'll expand this, and then as you can see, it's already picked up our clone blackboard, which is just what we want here. Now within this behavior tree, basically how it works is you can pick a selector or a sequencer, and either one of these is going to do a couple of different things. The sequence is going to take a bunch of different tasks that you build, and then it's going to run them in, well, a sequence. And then a selector instead will pick between two different tasks or two different selectors or sequences. A sequence will also run another selector or sequence as well. But basically that's the main difference between the two, is that one will pick between one or the other, and one of them will just run through the whole bit, and then it'll go back to the next task. Now under these selectors, let's just put the selector in here, and then under the selector we're going to plug the sequence in. And then under the sequence, what we could do is open up a task here. Now one of these tasks that we can do is move to, and this is going to tell our clone to move someplace. But right now it doesn't really have a place to move to. It doesn't have a direction, so it's not really going to do us any good. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a new task that's going to give us a location. But first, we need to go into our blackboard, and we're going to have to create our first key variable here. So our first key is going to be a vector, and we're just going to call this target location. Now that we have that set, let's go back into our behavior tree, and we're going to create a new task, which is selectable from the top ribbon here. And that's going to give us a new task. And it seems a little odd to me that it does this. It kind of just, it doesn't seem to give you the opportunity to name it, and the rest of Unreal kind of doesn't seem to do stuff like that. But either way, I mean, this is what we got to do. So let's go back out to our level editor, and we're just going to rename this real quick. And let's just call this random location. Alright, so let's open up this random location task, and we're going to open the full blueprint editor, and we need a new variable here. What we're going to do is we're going to call this bb underscore, whoops, go back, underscore target location, and we're going to change this to a blackboard key. Blackboard key selector is what we need here. Let's compile. And the first thing that we're going to throw in here is an execute, event receive execute AI, and then next we're going to put in a finish execute node. Whoops. Okay, now we got a few things to do in between here. We're going to drag off of our controlled pawn, and we're going to get actor location. And then from the return value, we're going to get a random point in navigable radius. Here we go. And now we're going to need that variable that we created. We're going to drag that in. And then we are going to move these down real quick. We're going to drag off of the variable. And we need to set blackboard value as a vector. Bring this up here. Plug that in. Plug in the random location here. We'll plug our executables in. And we need to make sure that the success is checked. Otherwise, it's going to not return the value that we want. Now for the radius, we need this to be, we need to set this to a certain distance away from the clone that we want to it to get a random location from. So let's just put something in like 2000, and now we're all set to go here. So let's compile and save. We'll close out of our random location, and back in our behavior tree we're going to slide this guy over, and here we're going to get our random location task. Now our move to right now has the blackboard key that's still set to self actor. We need that to be target location because we want it to move to our target location, not the self actor value that it was already set at. Alright, so let's slide these over, and the last point in the sequence that I'd like to add as a weight. And this way, right now it's set to 5 seconds, let's set it to 3. So this way, in our behavior tree, what our AI units are going to do is they're going to find the random location here, then they're going to move to that location, and then after they've reached it, they're going to wait 3 seconds, and then the sequence will go back and start over again. Okay, now before we test, there's one final thing we need to do here. Now we need to go back to our level editor, and we need to bring in a Navmesh bounds volume. So let's drag that in. Let's try to put that somewhere in the center. I think the center is about here on this thing. And then we're going to expand that to reach the entirety of where our AI unit wants to go. So let's drag that out a little bit, and then let's increase the size a bit. Okay, and now we can test. Alright, so let's get our clone. And he immediately goes to a random location, and if we spawn more, they're going to do the same thing. And they'll immediately go to their new locations, and after 3 seconds, they will move again. And with that, that's how you give your character the ability to duplicate. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed creating the duplication power. If you got something out of this video, give it a like. If you have any other power ideas that you think would be cool to see in a video, leave it in the comments below, and I'll figure out how to do it or point you in the right direction. Thanks, and we'll see you next time on Super Unreal Powers.